Hello, you beautiful buggers. Welcome back to the Overclock Workshop. Thankfully, we're getting closer and closer to the end. Now, I hope you don't mind me saying something like that. It probably comes off as strange, and it is slightly strange, but let's be honest, this series apparently only has legs because I've really forced it to. I understand why the grenade ones have fallen off, which is appropriate terminology for grenades. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I think traversal tools and mobility tools are something that someone thinks about a lot. It's something that the community thinks about a lot. Overclocks for them, and weapons is far more obvious. Grenades are far more obscure, however. Once again, not going to go through all the reasons why that is. I've done that many times before. Instead, we're just going to take a look at what I made all of those months ago, probably edging on a year ago now. And see if we can glean from them any interesting mechanics that could be attached to the pheromone canister, as Scout's third grenade, or possibly even translated onto other aspects of the game, which is usually better because that's the kind of thing that is more appropriate, in my opinion, to speculate about or make suggestions for, is not a hypothetical scenario where we have grenade overclocks. However, I will in part be entertaining that as well, pardon me, as per usual. I think the first one actually leans into this very, very well. Anyway, hello. I actually do think that this one, with the exception of the unstable, might actually be just the best one in terms of ideas that we can translate into other aspects of the game. So I want to get right into it. It partly does make me wish that I could brand the series differently, and I could, but I frankly, and this is a very trivial confession, I suppose. I kind of just can't be bothered, in the sense that we're close to getting through this, and I think what's going to take its place is going to be better, basically. So I'm just not worried. I'm just getting through these until we're done, and that's fine. I think they're just fine. So either way, let's begin with what the clean one is. Obviously, we're going to take it in a different direction. The Bug Whisperer, which is the clean, obviously states, making fun of the description of the pheromone canister, where it says R&D are proud of this one, which can't blame them for. Pheromones are actually quite underrated. If I want to say anything about them as actual grenades, I think they are underrated and really cool. I don't use them much at all, but I think they're still underappreciated. I think Scout grenades are more equal than people think. For a lot of people, it's very black and white. I think there is an equality to be found in them. Personally, Cryo Grenade is actually my least favourite. Take that as you will. Either way, slightly increased effect radius, we're going to ignore that. We're just going to ignore that. The only reason like that would be a thing is if we were actually getting overclocks, then it would work for a clean overclock. Can apply pheromones to yourself if caught in the radius. Now, this is the big one. This is the kicker. This is the big, awesome mechanic. Now, the idea of taunting enemies has been around for a very long time, and in my opinion, would be very, very well suited to a perk. Absolutely. And the idea of manipulating enemy aggro is also very common, in fact, in both deliberate and non-deliberate ways on the part of the player. For example, a non-deliberate one would be gunners on grappling hooks are actually more likely to be targeted by ranged enemies, if you didn't know. And I believe, conversely, or in the same vein, also less likely to be targeted by non-ranged enemies. So that's sort of manipulating aggro there a lot. But obviously, we do this in general by use of the pheromone grenades, by use of things like Beastmaster, and, well, actually, that's it. Lures, I guess, as well. But also, sometimes we just do it because we do it. Kiting enemies. That's a way of manipulating enemy aggro to lead to benefits for you and your team. Especially in a team scenario, if someone's going to be kiting or leading things away from the group, it's probably going to be the scout. And I think giving him a way to perform this role would actually be really interesting. I think the idea of a taunt perk is still fine. And I think it's fine because a taunt perk could be far more interesting if it worked something like the Borderlands 2 taunt skill, which Gunzerker has, where it actually increases your health and your defense while it's active, which would be quite interesting. Either way, I'm also sort of enticed by the idea of Scout having his own version of it contained within the pheromone canister. So what I'm getting at here is actually what would be, excuse me, sneezing. How unprofessional. So what I'm getting at is actually something to be added to the pheromone canister as it is. To be made a base mechanic, where if the scout catches himself in it, he is now pheromoned, and therefore enemies will be more attracted to him. I did actually neglect to mention the example of the dreadnought, which people didn't really understand exactly what I'm saying. You must have noticed, though, in the normal dreadnought, the standard Glyphid dreadnought fight, that it sometimes spews a ball at you that releases swarmers. This same ball, if you are hit by it or caught in its radius, you have a pheromone effect applied to you, which will affect all enemies, I'm pretty sure, but it's specifically for the swarmers that the dreadnought spawns. So basically, we're sort of trying to have a way of applying that manually, and you might think, that's kind of dangerous. And I say, no, it's not. No, it isn't. It's not dangerous for Scout himself. If you're on solo, everything's coming after you anyway, unless you use Steve, which in that case, it actually could be kind of interesting. But obviously, that wouldn't be too dangerous either. If you hit yourself with it accidentally, it's not going to be much of an issue, because if you hit yourself with it accidentally, it's because you're probably throwing it at other enemies or at enemies around you, and they're going to be aggro to each other more than they are to you. This would be a way of using it when there are no enemies directly around, and you just want to attract them all to yourself to save your teammates. Or, better yet, maybe you want to pheromone your teammates, which would be... They wouldn't have to implement that. That could introduce a lot of troll potential. But at least giving the scout the ability to do this to himself, to turn him into a taunter, someone that can much more easily attract the enemies, especially over larger distances, and kite them more effectively, I think would be a genuinely valuable mechanic. And I know that Ghost Ship aren't a fan of increasing the base strength of the dwarves, but that's not exactly what this is. This is just a buff to Pheromone Canister in a very specific way, and that's why I think it's a perfectly valid idea. I'd really like to see them. I'd really like them to consider it. Not see them consider it. There's no way to see them consider it other than them having it be a thing during experimental branch and then, taking it away. And I'd rather that they didn't do that specifically. So, yeah, have Scout be able to pheromone himself would be pretty cool, and I think you can understand why. But there's more. The balanced one, Berserker Brew, inspired by, well, the capture is inspired by Megamind, but the actual name is inspired by Bloons Tower Defense 6. Affected enemies gain increased strength, and that's attack and defense, speed and aggro for an extended period of time. Actually 10 seconds extended time. Why is it telling me that's incorrect? Fuck off. No! I hate corrections. With a greatly reduced effect radius. Now, obviously works... hold on. I'm going to explain exactly what it is. The idea is actually to create, not necessarily single, but much smaller, possibly even single enemies to fight for you, as they do when they're pheromone, basically. And this is completely on their own. And this is no other enemies around, obviously. Yeah, they'll come after you, but... have them be affected for longer, and also have them be stronger. But obviously, we can hit far less of them. So, how does this work? Well, obviously, it would be perfectly valid as an overclock, if we had them, which we don't. So I actually really like the idea of this as some kind of perk, or possibly even a new grenade, although who that goes to is kind of difficult. I guess it would be Engineer, because Scout makes sense, but he's already got, Pheromone Grenade. So I actually like the idea of this being a perk, an active perk. It's a sort of counter, possibly even an alternative to Beastmaster. If anyone's seen SNIS's second most recent video, unless that's the Oktoberfest one, in which case ignore that, but it's still the second most recent. He posited something when it comes to what Ghost Ship are going to do with perks whenever that happens. We're assuming it's going to be Season 5. In that perks could actually have branching paths. Instead of having to use all the perk points to build up a perk to its maximum strength, it would start at its maximum strength, but you'd be able to unlock different versions of it that possibly even have trade-offs. They would simply be different, offering very distinct benefits, but they would be different in a way that isn't inherently just adding onto the perk. So this could almost be an alternative Beastmaster, where it would be a temporary conversion. You'd be able to temporarily tame any creature, and I think that's maybe the best way to best direction to go with this idea. The idea of taming any creature that you want, but only for a temporary amount of time, or only temporarily, I should say. There's no such thing as a temporary amount of time. Temporarily, I think is pretty cool, and it kind of stops there. And I kind of just want to put that idea out there, and I hope people will agree that it's really cool. Can you imagine being able to tame a bulk detonator? I guess bosses would be off the table for sure, but everything else is fair game, I think, with this, because everything else that isn't a boss can be pheromoned. So, Berserker Brew, do it. Yeah, and it does kind of stop there. I'm not gonna waste my time. I think I got the point across, and if you think it's cool, then maybe we can get somewhere with it. Yeah. What about the unstable though? Well, it's a bit stranger. It's a boogie bomb. Bugs can spread the pheromone effect to each other, but instead of attacking each other, they just dance and reduced effect duration, which isn't particularly relevant. The idea here is what if they could spread the pheromones to each other by contact, but so when one enemy, an unaffected enemy, attacks a pheromone enemy, they would pick up the pheromones then. But obviously the pheromone enemy isn't attacking. Once they're pheromone, they just start grooving, you know, like how a perma-stunned grunt does. You know how it just sort of goes back, it just sort of does that. You know, that's sort of what I'm thinking. So implementation, yeah, okay, hypothetical grenade overclock scenario, yeah, sure, we get it. What about the actual game itself? Well, new grenade maybe, boogie bomb for engineer, yeah, possibly, or even so. When it comes as an effect, what this idea is playing into is actually the idea of heat propagation or heat spread. I mean, I think heat propagation is the official term. Even though it's only used in code, it's not actually used in game anywhere. It's basically what heat does. Cold doesn't do it, but when an enemy's on fire, they become a heat source, basically, and they spread the fire to other enemies gradually. This would be a different effect, but still follow a similar train of logic. But it's just basically it's an effect that will spread by enemies making contact with each other. So basically, it's kind of completely overpowered, which is why I wasn't as confident in this one as I was in the other two. But still, with the idea of a domino effect that enemies spread to each other, I think is pretty cool. I guess it would just need to have a sort of a way of capping itself, I guess. Maybe you have sort of a central enemy and it spreads it to the enemies around it, and then it spreads. No, I guess it would be really difficult to balance it in that way. Maybe that's why it's not a thing. But it could be. The boogie bomb could be a thing in a scenario where it doesn't actually attract enemies. The enemies simply have this, and if you manage to lead another enemy into the enemy, then they would pick up the effect. Could be something like that. I'm not sure. So yeah, it is a little bit of a strange one. One of the ones much more so bogged down in being an overclock for something that we don't have overclocks for. So I guess this video was not split evenly, but split sort of cleanly, in that the first two I'm pretty confident can be ideas implemented in their own right in other aspects of the game, but the third one kind of can't be. I still love to see it. I think it really does play into my idea of a really cool sort of new gameplay system where we'll be able to take the craft beers, like all the ones like Burning Love and Blackout Stout, all of those as sort of throwables of some sort into missions. And if we could do that, then the Blackreach Blonde would have this effect, basically. It's how I imagine it. So there's also that system, which could see itself becoming a video at some point. No, I'm not making any promises about that, but it's an idea that I think is pretty cool, so it might come up again. Either way, that's all I've got for the Pheromone Canister Overclock Workshop. If you enjoyed this, please make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to stay on top of all things Deep Rock Galactic, including news, patches, and behind the scenes info, then you can click the bell as well. It might help you out. Obviously, we are dialing back the upload schedule somewhat. So if there's been any kind of frustration sort of over how much we post and it not all being particularly relevant, then maybe that will change a little bit. And you feel more compelled either to subscribe or click the bell, because probably going to be close to an equal amount of news videos to actual videos. I'm not sure. That's probably not true, but it might be partly true. And hopefully, when you're watching this, we've already done a stream where we design the Glyphid Stalker. No promises, though. If that hasn't happened, then I'm very sorry. Either way, once again, thank you so much for watching, as always. And I'll see you next time for a build showcase. Take care.